Why did no one notice the way her hand trembled against the table? The briefing room was loud, papers shuffling, chairs dragging, boots knocking against the concrete floor. But inside her chest, it was all silence. A hollow, pressing silence that drowned out every voice but her own heartbeat. She sat at the far end of the rectangular table, eyes locked on the satellite photos glowing against the wall. The compound, the mission, the guard they said didn't move. He'd been there for weeks, frozen like a shadow against the fence line. Some of the men laughed about it. Statue with a rifle, one had called him. Easy. But she hadn't laughed. Because she knew what it meant when someone didn't move. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't boredom. It was discipline, and discipline in silence was dangerous. The colonel's voice cracked across the room like gravel scraping steel. Team Alpha goes in at 200, Overwatch from the east, entry from the north, exfil South Ridge. She glanced around. No one looked her way. They never did. The only woman at the table, the one with the quiet eyes and the quiet voice, the one they assumed would follow orders without question. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Her hand slid into her pocket, fingers brushing the folded edge of a photograph. She didn't need to pull it out. She knew every crease, every faded color, every face caught in the frozen frame. That picture was her anchor, her reason for being here at all, and her reason for keeping quiet. A voice cut through her thoughts. "Lieutenant, you got the shot." She blinked, eyes lifted. The question hung heavy, half challenge, half doubt. A man with a buzz cut, jaw clenched tight, smirk curling just enough to sting. She let the pause linger, just enough to make them wait. Then she said softly, "If he moves, I'll know before he does." The smirk faded, not because of her words but because of her tone. Calm, certain, the kind of certainty that didn't need to shout. The colonel nodded. "Good, you'll take Overwatch." And just like that it was set. The night stretched wide and heavy over the valley. The air smelled of dust and cold metal. She lay prone on the ridge, rifle pressed against her shoulder, cheek sinking into the familiar curve of the stock. Breath slow, controlled. Each inhale a measure, each exhale a prayer. Through the scope the compound glowed faintly under the broken moonlight. Rusted gates, faded walls, and there the guard, the one who never moved. He stood exactly as in the photo. Same rifle, same posture, eyes forward, unblinking. But tonight she noticed something different. His left hand twitched just once, not much, but enough to unravel every joke told about him. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She didn't pull, not yet. The comms crackled softly in her ear. "Alpha in position, moving on your mark." Her lips parted but no words came. For a moment she just listened to the night. The wind brushing over rocks, the faint hum of insects, the sound of her own pulse beating in her eardrums. And then another sound, so faint she thought she imagined it, a boot scuffing dirt, but not from Alpha, from the guard. Her heart thudded. "He's moving." Static, then a reply, "Say again." She swallowed, voice low, controlled. "The guard, he moved." The line went silent. The men down there trusted pictures more than instincts. They hadn't been staring through glass for hours. They hadn't seen the twitch. But she had. She adjusted her scope. The guard shifted again, almost imperceptibly. A step, a weight change. His fingers flexed on the rifle grip. He wasn't a statue anymore. Her breath caught. Why now? Why tonight? She thought of the photograph again, pressed against her thigh. She thought of the promise she'd made to the faces in it to protect, to return, to never fail them again. The promise that had brought her here, lying cold in foreign dirt, staring at a man who wasn't supposed to move. And she wondered, was this a test, a trap, or just a man like her, bound by duty and silence, waiting for something unseen? The comms broke again. "Lieutenant, confirm Overwatch. We're at the gate." She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, felt the chill run down her spine. Then she opened them, spoke clearly. "Hold position, he's not what we thought." Another pause, frustration hissed through the line. "With all due respect, we don't have time." Her finger pressed against the trigger, not to fire, but to remind herself she could. She could end this uncertainty in one pull, but the weight in her chest told her not to. Not yet. Because something about the guard's movement wasn't hostile. It was deliberate, controlled, as if he knew he was being watched. Her stomach tightened. And then it happened. The guard turned his head, slow, deliberate, and looked directly toward her ridge. Her lungs froze. Through glass and distance, through shadow and silence, his eyes locked with hers. Not guessing, not searching, knowing. Her voice almost cracked. "He sees me." The line burst alive with curses, confusion, orders tangled. Someone shouted, "Take the shot." But she didn't, she couldn't. Because in that one look, in that stillness breaking into motion, she recognized something terrifying. He wasn't guarding the compound. He was guarding the people inside from what was coming. Her hands shook against the rifle. Every instinct screamed contradiction. Training told her one thing. Her gut, her grief, her memory told her another. She remembered the last time she ignored her gut. The last time she let orders drown out the voice inside. And the folded photograph reminded her of the cost. So she whispered, barely audible, more to herself than to the comms. "Not yet, not this way." The guard took a single step forward. And in that single step, her confidence wavered, her certainty fractured. Because suddenly, she wasn't sure who the enemy was anymore. The night deepened, the mission hung on a thread, and somewhere inside that silence, she felt the beginning of a choice, one that would cost her everything. But for now, she held her breath. And she waited. What would make a man stand so still, for so long, and then move only when she arrived? The question clawed at her chest as the compound below seemed to breathe with shadows. The team pressed against the gate, waiting on her word, and she couldn't give it, not yet. The guard hadn't raised his weapon. He hadn't shouted an alarm. He had only looked at her, a step, a stare, a silence that carried more weight than 100 bullets. Her breath trembled against the scope. She forced herself to steady. "Don't look at him like he's a man," she whispered under her breath. "Look at him like he's a variable, a piece on the board." But she knew better. Because she had seen those eyes before, in different uniforms, in different dust, years ago when the world first taught her that not every enemy was an enemy. Sometimes, they were just people standing where they were told to stand. The comms crackled. "Lieutenant, we're exposed here. Orders." Her finger hovered over the radio switch. She almost said advance. She almost said engage. The words sat like stones on her tongue, but they never left. Instead, she asked herself the question no one else dared. What if we're wrong? The wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of burning, not fire but oil. Diesel maybe. She noticed details others would have missed. A wire stretched taut along the west wall. A flicker of light from behind the gate, rhythmic like coded flashes. This wasn't random. This wasn't careless. The guard didn't blink. His posture was no longer stillness but signal. Her stomach sank. "They're baiting us," she muttered. The radio hissed, "Repeat." Her voice hardened. "Trap, don't breach. Fall back 5 meters now." For a second nothing moved. Then muffled curses, hurried scuffling, boots scraping rock. She imagined them glancing at each other, rolling eyes, dismissing her as paranoid. But they moved, and that movement might have saved their lives. Because a moment later the gate shuddered, the ground rumbled, a pressure wave tore the silence apart. The compound lit in a burst of fire. The explosion was controlled, contained, but violent enough that, had they been closer, Alpha would have been shredded where they stood. Dust and flame rolled outward, coughing black smoke into the night sky. She shielded her face, grit stinging her eyes. Through the haze, her heart pounded not at the fire but at the figure still standing. The guard. He hadn't flinched, not even as the blast swallowed the gate. He stood firm, weapon slung, as if he had expected it all along. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just discipline, it was knowledge. He had known exactly where to stand, exactly when to move. And worse, he had known she was watching. A voice cut through her headset, panicked. What the hell was that? She clenched her jaw, answered flatly. Controlled detonation. They wanted us close. And you knew. I suspected. Silence, heavy, accusatory. Then another voice, softer, older, Sergeant Ramos. The only one who ever treated her words like more than background noise. She bought us 5 meters. That 5 meters kept you breathing. The others didn't respond, but the weight shifted, a grudging silence. She let out a slow exhale, not relief, just survival. But survival came at a cost. Through the fatting smoke, the guard finally moved. One step, then another. He walked calmly, deliberately, as if the explosion hadn't happened. His boots crunched the gravel in steady rhythm, the sound carrying eerily in the stillness. She tracked him through the scope, every muscle taut. Her trigger finger twitched with every step he took. One pull, that was all it would take. One squeeze and the threat, the mystery, would end. But the photograph in her pocket burned like fire. She remembered the last time she'd pulled the trigger too soon. The boy in the street, 15, maybe 16, a shadow where he shouldn't have been, a rifle raised in panic. Her shot cracked too fast. And afterward, when they searched him, they found only a broken radio. For weeks she'd woken in the night hearing the radio's hollow static. For months she carried his face in her dreams. And still she carried it now. That was the day she stopped being proud of her skill. That was the day she realized accuracy meant nothing if your heart missed the truth. And that was why she couldn't pull now, not yet. The comms sputtered again. Frustration snapped in every word. Lieutenant, what the hell are you waiting for? Her throat ached with the answer she couldn't give. That maybe this man wasn't her enemy. That maybe the real danger hadn't shown itself yet. That maybe, just maybe, the mission they believed in wasn't as clear as they thought. But those words had no place in this world of orders and objectives. So she swallowed them, let silence answer instead. Her silence spoke louder than explanation. It bought her a second more to think, to wait, to hope she was right. The guard stopped, just meters from the collapsed gate framed by smoke and fire. He lifted his head again, looked straight toward her position. And this time he lifted his hand, slowly, palm open. Not a threat, a signal. Her chest seized. Was it surrender, a warning, a plea? The headset erupted with noise. He's signaling reinforcements, take the shot. No, wait. Lieutenant, do it. Her finger pressed against the trigger, breath held, vision tunneled. But her heart screamed louder than her orders. What if he was trying to tell her something? What if the blast wasn't meant for them, but for something else, something deeper inside the compound? Her voice trembled, soft but certain. Hold fire. The words tasted like betrayal. Not to herself, but to the uniform, the creed, the unspoken law that hesitation kills. But hesitation had saved them once already tonight. And so she trusted it again. Time stretched thin. The guard's open hand lingered in the air. Smoke coiled around him like shrouds of gray, and then slowly he lowered it. Turned his back. And walked inside. Her body sagged against the dirt. Relief, fear, confusion, none of it felt clean. The radio spat curses. Rage, disbelief, she tuned them out. Because beneath the noise, beneath the judgment, beneath the mission itself, one truth pulsed in her chest. This wasn't over, not even close. Hours later, when the team pulled back to a safe house, the room buzzed with tension. Some stared at her with contempt. Others avoided her eyes altogether. Only Sergeant Ramos lingered close, his weathered face unreadable. When the noise finally died, he asked the question quietly. "Why didn't you take him?" She didn't answer at first. She reached into her pocket instead. Fingers found the photograph. She pulled it out, smoothing its creases. Three faces smiled back at her, a husband, a daughter, herself in simpler times. Before the boy, before the guilt, before the silence that had built walls around her heart. She held it in the low light, eyes burning. "Because sometimes," she said finally, "the wrong death costs more than the right mission." Ramos stared at her, studying the pain behind the words. Then he gave a slow nod. "That's not something you tell command." "No," she whispered, "that's something you carry." And as she lay awake later, listening to the night breathe outside, she knew the truth. The guard wasn't finished. And neither was she. Because one way or another, their paths would cross again. And when they did, the choice she made tonight would either save them all or damn her forever. Why couldn't she sleep? The safe house was quiet, too quiet. The others sprawled on mats and cots, weapons within reach, breaths heavy in restless slumber. But she lay awake on the thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, counting every creak of wood, every sigh of wind through the broken shutters. Her finger brushed the photograph again. Always the photograph. She'd memorized its folds the way others memorized maps. It was the only piece of home she had left, the only proof she'd once lived another life, a life with laughter instead of static, bedtime stories instead of gunfire. But she wasn't holding it for comfort tonight. She was holding it because she needed to remember why. Why she hadn't pulled the trigger. Why her instincts had screamed to wait. Her mind replayed the moment over and over. The guard's open hand, the steady gaze, the explosion timed too perfectly. None of it fit the pattern she'd been trained to expect, and patterns were everything to her. Snipers lived and died on patterns. And this man had broken one. A whisper stirred from the corner of the room. "You're not sleeping either." She turned her head. Sergeant Ramos sat hunched on a crate, back curved like a mountain worn down by weather. His eyes glimmered faintly in the dark, a tired smile tucked into his face. She didn't answer at first. Silence was easier, but silence with Ramos was different. It didn't press, it waited. Finally she exhaled. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him." "The guard." She nodded. Ramos shifted, joints popping. "Sometimes it's not the ones we shoot that haunt us. Sometimes it's the ones we don't." Her throat tightened. "What if I was wrong?" He studied her. "And what if you were?" She let her eyes fall shut, pressing the photo against her chest. But the silence didn't soothe. It only echoed. At dawn, the safe house door rattled with a coded knock. The team stirred, groggy but sharp, rifles in hand. A courier stepped in, young, nervous, carrying fresh intel. Maps spread. Satellite images shifted. The colonel's voice crackled through the radio, clipped and cold. "Mission proceeds tonight. Compound still priority. No room for hesitation. You will breach." Her stomach twisted. They hadn't seen what she saw. They didn't believe what she believed. To command, the guard was nothing but a barrier. To her, he was a question mark too dangerous to ignore. The colonel's voice sharpened. "And Lieutenant, you will take the shot if the opportunity presents itself. Understood?" Every eye turned toward her. She felt the photograph burn in her pocket. She forced herself to nod. Understood. But inside she wasn't sure at all. The sun bled into evening. The team moved through the valley in shadows, boots sinking into dry earth. Every sound was amplified, the clink of gear, the hush of fabric, the breath caught in lungs. She lagged a half step behind, not from weakness but from thought. What if the guard wasn't protecting the compound from them? What if he was protecting something else inside? Civilians, prisoners, secrets command didn't want them to know. The idea gnawed at her like hunger. She'd been on enough missions to know that intel was never as clean as it looked on paper. Behind every objective was a story. Behind every story was a lie. And maybe, just maybe, she was tired of being the hand that enforced someone else's lie. They reached their new perch by midnight. Higher ground this time, sharper view. She settled into position, rifle steady, scope sweeping the compound below. The smoke from last night had cleared. The gate lay twisted, mangled steel teeth jutting upward like broken ribs. And there, just beyond it, the guard. He was back. Same posture, same stillness, as if the fire hadn't touched him, as if the world couldn't. But something was different. She adjusted focus. His face was lined, older than she'd realized. Not the blank stare of a zealot, but the worn patience of a man who'd stood watch too long. And his eyes, when they lifted, didn't look through her. They looked at her. A chill coursed down her spine. The comms ticked alive. Alpha in position, awaiting green. Her finger brushed the trigger guard. Her heartbeat slowed, disciplined, measured. Every breath counted. But her mind whispered a question. Why hasn't he raised his weapon? The guard didn't move, he simply watched. And then a flicker behind him. A figure, small, moving quickly, ducking under broken metal. She refocused, her pulse spiked. It was a child. A girl, maybe 10, barefoot, hair tangled, darting from shadow to shadow. She clutched something close to her chest, a bundle, a doll, maybe food. Her throat closed. The guard shifted slightly, stepping in front of her path, not to stop her, but to shield her from sight. Her hands shook against the rifle. The world tunneled into that one image, a soldier shielding a child, not with bullets, but with his body. She whispered before she could stop herself. There are civilians. The radio hissed, say again. She pressed the mic, louder this time. Inside, children, he's protecting them. Static, then anger. Negative, that compound is hostile, take him down. Her chest burned. I said there are children. The line snapped. The colonel's voice this time, sharp as a blade. Lieutenant, your orders are clear. Neutralize the guard and clear the path. Do it now. Her finger curled against the trigger. The weight of command pressed hard. The weight of memory pressed harder. She remembered the boy with the broken radio, the silence after the shot, the way his body crumpled in the dirt while her team marched on, unbothered. She had carried that silence for years. She couldn't carry it again. The girl disappeared into the shadows of the compound. The guard stayed where he was, still, unshaken. And she made her choice. She lifted her head from the scope, voice steady, though her insides shook. Negative shot, repeat, I will not fire. Chaos erupted on the channel. Yells, threats, promises of court-martial, none of it mattered. She closed her eyes, whispered into the night. Not this time. When she looked again, the guard was gone. The gate stood empty, smoke curling from its ruins. Only silence lingered. Her heart hammered. She didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. Because his absence didn't mean safety. It meant the game had changed. Hours later, the team pulled back again, mission aborted under uncertain conditions. The colonel's fury roared through the radio, demanding answers, threatening careers. But the ground truth reality was simple. They hadn't breached. And she, the sniper who wouldn't shoot, bore the weight of blame. Back at the safe house, the air was thick with resentment. Some men cursed her under their breath. One spat on the floor near her cot. Another muttered, should have left her behind. She sat alone, cleaning her rifle in silence, letting their anger wash over her like rain against stone. But inside she wasn't angry, she was haunted. By the girl, by the guard, by the possibility that the mission they were sold wasn't the mission that was real. Ramos approached quietly, setting a hand on her shoulder. They won't forgive you easy, he murmured. She didn't look up, I didn't come here for forgiveness. Then why did you come? She paused, her hands stilled over the rifle. The photograph lay on the table, edges curled, colors fading. She touched it gently. Because once I failed the people who mattered, and I swore I'd never fail them again, even if it means failing everyone else. Ramos studied her, eyes heavy with understanding. He didn't push further, he only nodded once. And in that quiet nod, she felt less alone. But deep inside, she knew the truth. The guard hadn't disappeared. He was waiting. And the next time she saw him, it wouldn't be across the scope. It would be face to face. And in that meeting, one of them would break. Why had he spared her? The question stalked her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. She had seen him see her. Their eyes had locked across distance and silence, and in that instant he could have raised his rifle. He could have signaled. He could have ended her. But he didn't. He had only lifted his hand, a gesture she couldn't decode. And then he had vanished, leaving her with questions that command would never allow her to ask. Now, as the safe house walls closed in around her, the weight of that unanswered silence pressed harder than any weapon ever had. The next morning, the colonel's voice snarled through the radio like barbed wire. You jeopardized the mission twice. You disobeyed a direct order. You're off Overwatch, effective immediately. Her jaw tightened. The words stung, but not because of the demotion. She could live without the rifle. She couldn't live without the trust she just burned. Ramos leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. After the transmission cut, he spoke low. They want you to fall in line. Do you plan to? She looked at him, eyes hard. Not if it means pulling the trigger on the wrong people. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then you better brace yourself, because they'll come for you before the enemy does. The day passed heavy, sweat dripping through uniforms, tempers sharp in the cramped safe house. She caught their stares, the half-spoken insults, the muttered curses. To them, she wasn't a comrade anymore. She was a liability. And in war, liabilities didn't last long. So she kept to herself, cleaning gear, tracing the photo with her thumb, trying to ground herself in the reason she was here. Her daughter's smile, the warmth of her husband's arm around her shoulders, a life stolen too soon, ripped apart by one roadside blast that she hadn't been there to stop. She told herself that every mission, every bullet, every sacrifice was for them. To make the world safer, less cruel, less full of the kind of losses that left children without mothers and mothers without children. But what if this mission wasn't that? What if she was being asked to create more orphans instead of preventing them? The thought gnawed like acid. Night fell again. The team prepped to move, gear strapped, rifles checked. But this time she wasn't invited. You're on rear watch, one of them barked. Stay put, don't get in the way. Her pride bristled. She wanted to argue, but Ramos gave her a subtle shake of the head. So she stayed. From the rooftop of the safe house, she scanned the horizon, radio silent, eyes locked on the valley where the compound crouched like a sleeping beast. The moonlight spilled silver across the dirt, shadows stretching long and thin. And then she saw it. Movement, not from her team, not from the perimeter, from within the compound itself. Figures small, dozens of them, maybe more, moving in lines, not soldiers. Their gait was wrong, staggered, uneven. She adjusted focus. Civilians. Her chest constricted. Men, women, children, some carrying bundles, others clutching each other's hands. They moved quietly, urgently, slipping through broken walls and disappearing into the night. And there at the edge, half hidden in shadow, the guard. Guiding them. Her hands trembled on the scope. He wasn't holding them hostage. He was helping them escape. The mission briefing had painted the compound as a hub for insurgents, a threat to stability, a place that had to be erased. But what she was seeing didn't fit that picture, not even close. Her radio hissed. The team's voices whispered in her ear. They were closing in, preparing breach positions. They didn't know. They couldn't see what she was seeing. And if they moved forward now, they wouldn't just kill fighters. They'd kill families. Her breath quickened. She had seconds to decide. Alpha, hold position, she whispered into the mic. Static, then a sharp response. Negative, we're moving. Her stomach knotted. She raised her voice. Do not breach. I repeat, civilians are inside. Abort entry. Rage erupted on the channel. Accusations, curses, disbelief. She knew what they were thinking, that she was cracking under pressure, hallucinating ghosts, letting guilt rewrite reality. But she wasn't hallucinating. She could see them, she could count them. And then the girl, the same one she'd seen before. She stumbled in the dirt, knees buckling. The guard bent down, lifted her into his arms, and carried her toward the dark edge of the valley. Her throat burned. This wasn't the face of an enemy. This was the face of a protector. She didn't think, she acted. Abort mission, she snapped into the radio, voice sharper than steel. That's an order. The channel went dead silent. Then the colonel's voice thundered through, laced with venom. You don't give orders, Lieutenant. You follow them. Stand down or face consequences. Her heart pounded. She could feel every eye of her team turning against her, even without seeing their faces. But she couldn't stop now. If you breach, you'll be slaughtering civilians, and I won't let that happen. The silence stretched, thick, dangerous. Finally, Ramos' voice cut through, steady, calm. Confirm visual, Lieutenant. Are you absolutely certain? She swallowed hard. I am. Another pause. She imagined him looking at the others, weighing trust against doubt. And then his words sealed the night. Alpha, fall back. The team didn't argue, not because they believed her, because they trusted him. But trust was fragile. And when command heard of this, when reports reached ears far away from this valley, she knew what would happen. Her career would end. Her name would burn. And all she'd have left was the choice she made tonight. Still, as she lowered her rifle, she felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Because for once, she hadn't failed the faces in her photograph. Hours later, when the civilians were gone, when the compound lay silent and empty, she finally allowed herself to breathe. But her relief didn't last. Because on the far ridge, silhouetted against the paling night sky, she saw him. The guard, standing tall, rifle slung, watching her. Not as enemy, not as ally, something in between. Their eyes met again across the distance. No words, no signals, just recognition. And then he raised his hand once more, not open this time, but clenched in a fist. A warning. Her stomach turned cold. Because that gesture meant something else entirely. The danger hadn't passed. It was only beginning. The debrief was worse than the firefight. She sat in the dimly lit safe house, headset still warm against her ears, as the colonel's fury poured through the static like acid. You undermined this mission. You countermanded a direct order. Do you have any idea what that means, Lieutenant? Her throat tightened, but she didn't answer. It means you've compromised operational integrity. You've compromised trust. You're finished. The channel clicked dead, leaving only silence and the hum of the safe house generator. The others turned on her like a pack of wolves scenting blood. You almost got us court-martialed, one of them spat. For what? For some ghost civilians no one else saw. Another slammed his fist on the table. She's protecting the enemy. She's compromised. The word cut deeper than any blade. Compromised. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ramos cut in before she could. His voice was quiet, measured, but it carried an edge that silenced the room. That's enough. The others muttered, glaring, but none of them pushed it further, not with Ramos standing in her corner. Still, their eyes lingered on her like crosshairs. Distrust thickened the air until it was suffocating. That night's sleep didn't come. She sat on the rooftop again, rifle across her lap, staring into the dark horizon. Every mission before this had felt like a storm she could weather, chaotic, brutal but straightforward. Orders, execution, survival. This was different, this was quicksand. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank. Her fingers traced the photograph in her pocket, worn edges curling under pressure. The faces smiled back at her through fading ink. She remembered her daughter's laugh, the sound that used to fill their home, a sound she hadn't heard in years, except in dreams. And with that memory came the old wound, the one that never healed, the convoy ambush, the call that shattered her world, the silence on the other end of the line when she realized her family was gone before she could even say goodbye. She had sworn never to let another innocent life be ripped away like that. But here she was, standing between command and civilians, lying to her own team and clinging to the haunting eyes of a man who should have been her enemy. The next morning, the reprieve ended. A drone feed crackled to life on the safe house monitors. The colonel's voice filled the room again, cold and surgical. "We have confirmation. The compound is clear. Enemy assets relocated. You failed to secure them because you disobeyed. Now you'll finish the job, destroy what remains, level it." One of the soldiers grinned bitterly. "Guess command, not giving us a choice this time." Her stomach twisted. "Level it," a polite way of saying burn it down. She stepped forward. That compound wasn't just a hideout, it was a shelter, there were families. The colonel's voice snapped like a whip. "There were, past tense. You had your chance, now follow orders, airstrike coordinates incoming." Her chest hollowed. Once the bombs dropped there, be no proof of what she'd seen. No civilians, no protector, no girl, just rubble. And history would be rewritten as cleanly as ash blowing in the wind. When the transmission ended, the room stirred with motion. Men strapped on gear, voices low, resigned. Only Ramos lingered. He studied her, eyes sharp, as though he could see the storm raging behind her silence. Finally he asked, "What are you going to do?" She swallowed hard. "The only thing I can." "Which is?" "Stop them." He didn't flinch, didn't scoff, didn't condemn. He only nodded once. "Then you won't be doing it alone." By dusk, the sky burned orange. The strike window approached. The team moved to the launch site, prepping coordinates, calibrating drones. She and Ramos trailed behind, whispers drowned by the sound of rotor blades overhead. "They think I'm crazy," she muttered. Ramos smirked faintly. "Crazy's just another word for seeing something they can't." She glanced at him. "Why are you helping me?" His expression hardened, but his voice stayed low. "Because I've seen this before. Orders that didn't match reality. Missions that erased more than just enemies." Her heart stuttered. "What happened?" He didn't answer. Not with words. Just the faraway look of a man haunted by ghosts of his own. The countdown ticked closer. 10 minutes. She knew she couldn't out-argue command. She couldn't convince the team. Logic wasn't enough. Proof wasn't enough. So she needed something else. Something undeniable. Her decision crystallized like glass snapping under pressure. She would go back to the compound herself. The choice was madness. The valley was crawling with insurgent patrols, and if command caught her moving off-grid, they'd brand her a deserter. But she couldn't watch a war crime get dressed up as an objective. She moved fast, slipping from camp under cover of dusk. Ramos followed, silent shadow at her heels. The valley stretched before them, shadows deepening, the compound looming like a scar on the land. Half a mile out she froze. Figures moved along the ridgeline, patrols, heavily armed, searching. Ramos whispered, "We cut through the wash, stay low." They slid into the dry riverbed, crouched beneath jagged rock, every movement slow, deliberate. Her pulse thudded like a drum. Every crunch of gravel felt like thunder. Every whisper of wind felt like betrayal. At last the compound rose ahead, abandoned, hollow. its walls shattered and windows gaping. Except it wasn't empty. She spotted him first. The guard, standing in the courtyard, alone this time, scanning the ridges as though expecting her. Her breath caught. It was impossible. How could he have known she'd come? And then she realized. He wanted her here. Ramos tensed beside her, hand hovering over his weapon. You trust him? She shook her head, voice low. I don't know, but I have to. Slowly, she stepped into the open. The guard's gaze locked on hers. No rifle raised, no hostility, only recognition. He lifted his hand again. Not a warning this time, not a fist, something else. He opened his palm, and in it lay a small, tattered book. He set it on the ground, backed away. Invitation. Her heart thundered. She moved closer, every step taut with risk. At her feet the book waited, worn, pages yellowed. She crouched, picked it up, and flipped it open. Her breath hitched. It wasn't a book, it was a ledger, names scrawled in careful handwriting. Dozens of them, hundreds, families, ages, notes. It was a record of everyone who had passed through this compound. Civilians, refugees, the people she had seen fleeing into the night. Her vision blurred. Proof. This was proof. She looked up at him, searching his face, but before she could speak, the night erupted. Gunfire. Shouts. Patrols swarming from the ridges, spotlights slicing through darkness. The guard snapped his rifle up, firing with brutal precision. Ramos dragged her back into cover, shouting over the chaos. Move, we're compromised. But all she could think, clutching the ledger tight against her chest, was that she had the truth now. And the truth was something worth dying for. The first shot cracked the night open like glass. She dropped flat, gravel biting into her palms, as bullets tore the compound walls into dust. Ramos fired back, muzzle flashing, his voice raw against the roar. Go, move. But she didn't move. Not yet. Her fingers clutched the ledger so tight the edges cut into her skin. Proof. The only thing that could save them from the lie command was about to bury. Another burst chewed through the dirt at her side. Shards stung her cheek. Instinct snapped her legs into motion. She scrambled behind a collapsed wall, chest heaving, ears ringing with the shriek of ricochets. The guard, that impossible sentinel, didn't hide. He stood exposed in the courtyard, his fire crisp, deliberate, thinning the patrols like a man who had nothing left to lose. Why the hell isn't he going down? Ramos muttered between bursts, eyes tracking the figure through smoke and dust. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Something in her refused to frame him as enemy anymore, not after what he'd given her. Not after he'd trusted her. The sky thundered with rotor blades. Searchlights carved across the valley. More soldiers poured in, boots pounding like war drums. We're outnumbered 10-1, Ramos growled. We stay, we're dead. She shook her head, clutching the ledger. If I lose this, they erase everything. They erase them. He stared at her, not angry, not disbelieving, just weighed down. Finally, he spat into the dirt. Then we run, and we make damn sure it gets out. They bolted through the shadows, darting between shattered walls, every step measured against the spray of gunfire. The air stank of cordite and dust. Every breath scraped raw. Behind them, the guard fought like a storm contained in one body. But storms burn out, and when the gunfire faltered for a heartbeat, she knew. He was gone. Her chest clenched, but there was no time to mourn. Only forward, only survival. A spotlight swept the yard, catching her silhouette. Shouts rose, tracers cut the night. Down, Ramos shoved her hard, and they tumbled into a drainage ditch. Water stung her cuts, mud swallowing her boots. They crawled, half blind, as bullets stitched the earth above. She bit down hard, teeth grinding against fear. One slip, one sound, and they'd be nothing but broken shadows in the mud. At last the fire slackened. Voices faded. The ditch spilled them into the open desert, stars wheeling high and cold above. For the first time since it started, silence. They collapsed behind a boulder, gasping. Ramos leaned back, face streaked with grime, eyes burning with the same disbelief hammering her chest. "You realize what just happened," he whispered. "They weren't after us. They weren't after insurgents. They were after this." He tapped the ledger against her chest. The weight of it pressed into her ribs like a verdict. Dawn crept slow, painting the valley in ash and gold. They hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every rustle in the brush, every gust of wind felt like footsteps closing in. Finally, she broke the silence. "I can't go back to command." Ramos studied her. "You already knew that." She nodded faintly. "But I can't stay out here either. If they find us first, it's over. We need somewhere safe." His jaw tightened. "I know a place, old contact, off-grid, but it's a day's march minimum." Her legs screamed from fatigue. Her throat burned from thirst, but she didn't hesitate. "Then we walk." The desert stretched endless, a graveyard of heat and silence. Every mile peeled layers off her strength, but the ledger never left her grip. Sometimes her mind drifted, back to her daughter's laughter, back to the photograph in her pocket, back to the convoy call, the one that came too late. Her heart ached with every memory, but it fueled her too. This wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about refusing to let another family's name be buried under collateral. By nightfall, their bodies staggered like shadows half-erased. They found shelter in a crumbled shepherd's hut, its roof half gone, walls leaning, but it was enough. They lit no fire, ate little, just water and silence. And then slowly Ramos spoke. "Back when I said I'd seen this before, it was Syria. 2017. Same setup. Orders didn't match intel. They told us it was an enemy stronghold. We hit it hard, turned it to rubble." His hands trembled against his knees. His voice was gravel. "After the dust cleared, I found toys, dolls, a ball, little shoes. We weren't killing fighters. We were killing their children." She looked at him, throat tight, unable to speak. "That ledger," his gaze found hers, raw and fierce. "That's why I'm still here, because I can't let it happen again, not if I have the chance to stop it." The night deepened. She lay awake, the ledger pressed to her chest, his confession carved into her mind. Every mission, every kill, every silent order she'd obeyed, they all felt heavier now. And yet, for the first time, she didn't feel alone under the weight. Morning. They rose broken, but they rose. Sand clung to their uniforms, lips cracked, eyes bloodshot. But the march resumed. Halfway through the valley, she froze. Figures on the ridge. Not patrols, not insurgents. Command's own drones hovered above, humming like vultures. They'd been found. Ramos cursed under his breath. "No cover, they'll pin us in seconds." Her mind raced, searching, clawing for any thread of escape, and then she saw it. A cave, half hidden by jagged stone, a dark wound in the ridge. "Move," she hissed. They sprinted, bullets whipping sand into clouds. Her lungs tore with every stride, vision tunneling, the ledger thumping against her ribs like a heartbeat. They dove inside just as the ridge exploded behind them. Dust swallowed them whole. Inside, darkness. The cave stretched deep, cool air brushing her skin. Ramos groaned, pressing his back to the stone, chest heaving. "We can't keep outrunning them. They'll hunt until we're done." Her fingers tightened on the ledger. "Then we don't run, we deliver." He blinked at her through shadows. To who? She didn't know yet. Journalists, allies, anyone outside command's grip. But she knew one thing: the truth had to breathe before it suffocated. That night, under the cave's silence, she finally opened the ledger again. She read names aloud in a whisper, one by one, like prayers. Each syllable carried weight, each name a reminder. And somewhere between the ink and the silence, she felt something shift. Not victory, not yet. But resolve. This wasn't about her survival anymore. It was about theirs. The cave swallowed her whisper. But the desert outside promised only more hunters, more fire, more silence waiting to erase it all. And still she knew. The war had changed. Because now she was fighting it her way. The cave did not feel safe for long. By dawn, the hum of drones returned, faint but constant, circling like carrion birds. The light slanted in harsh and unforgiving, revealing dust motes that moved every time her heart beat. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Each time her eyes drifted, she saw the guard's last stand, his body folding into shadow, his ledger pressed into her hands as if he'd known this moment would come. She sat against the wall, rifle across her knees, while Ramos patched his torn sleeve. His hands were steady, but his eyes weren't. They flicked to the cave mouth again and again, like a man measuring the time left before the tide drowned them. Finally he spoke. "They'll close this valley, make sure nothing walks out." She nodded, voice rough, "Which means we go up, not out." He frowned. "Up. The ridge. There's a relay station 2 clicks north. I saw it on the sat map last week. They use it for overwatch." Ramos stared. "You're thinking of hijacking their comms." Her throat tightened. "I'm thinking of getting the ledger out before we're erased." The climb was hell. Loose shale crumbled under their boots. Every ledge threatened to peel away. The sun scorched, relentless, pulling sweat from skin already cracked and raw. But higher meant hope. Higher meant a chance the truth could breathe outside Command's cage. Halfway up, a shadow darted overhead. They froze. A drone. It circled, scanning, pausing in eerie stillness as if listening. She pressed flat against stone, her body trembling. One flicker of movement and it would call fire down on them. Minutes passed like hours before it drifted away. She exhaled, shaky. Ramos muttered, "Feels like they're not hunting insurgents anymore. Feels like they're hunting us." She didn't answer, because he was right. By dusk they reached the ridge. The relay station crouched like an iron insect, antennae stabbing skyward. A skeleton crew manned it, 3 soldiers, maybe 4. Not enough to guard against an army, but enough to notice 2 shadows in the wrong place. Ramos crouched beside her, glassing the sight through his scope. 4. Standard kit. Comms hub on the east wall. She checked her rifle, fingers trembling against the bolt. "We don't kill unless we have to." He shot her a look. "You think they'll let us stroll in and borrow their signal?" Her jaw clenched. "We're not here to bury more names, we're here to save them." They waited for dark. The desert cooled, silence settling in layers. Crickets hummed, soft, fragile, almost mocking. She moved first, low, controlled, her breaths measured against each step. Ramos followed, shadow to her shadow. They cut the distance, slipping past rusted barrels and coiled wire. The hum of the relay tower grew louder, a living thing, the heartbeat of Command itself. And then, a click. Cold steel kissed her neck. "Don't move." Her blood turned to ice. A soldier stepped from shadow, rifle pressed to her spine. Another flanked Ramos, weapon raised. They'd been spotted. Her gut sank as more boots thudded into the dirt. 4 became 6, then 8. A patrol, unexpected, now circling them like wolves. One of them, the leader, tore off his helmet. His face was lean, scarred, his eyes sharp with something colder than anger. "Well," he drawled, "Command said you might try something like this." Her stomach nodded. They knew. He smirked. "They know everything, and they want their book back." His gaze flicked to the ledger clutched in her hand. Ramos tensed. "If you knew, why not kill us already?" The leader shrugged. "Because they want you alive, for now, to make sure no one else gets ideas." He leaned closer to her, breath hot against her cheek. "But accidents happen in the field." Her pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed to fight, to break free. But one wrong twitch and Ramos would be dead before his rifle cleared his chest. She forced her voice steady. This ledger proves civilians were here, families, not insurgents. The leader chuckled bitter. You think that matters? Orders don't care about truth, they care about obedience. Silence pressed in. Her grip tightened on the ledger until her knuckles whitened. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted it. If orders mean erasing them, then orders are the enemy. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then chaos. Ramos moved first, slamming his elbow into the nearest soldier, twisting free. Gunfire erupted, deafening, flashes ripping the night. She dove, rolling into cover, clutching the ledger to her chest as bullets carved sparks off the rock. Shouts filled the station, commands fractured by panic. Soldiers scrambled, but Ramos was faster, dragging her toward the east wall. Move inside. They burst through the doorway, alarms wailing. Screens flickered with green maps, radio chatter blaring in fractured bursts. This was it, their one chance. She slammed the ledger onto the console, fingers flying over the keys. Years of training buried deep clawed their way back. Encryption codes, satellite relays, the language of command turned against itself. Ramos held the doorway, firing in tight bursts, sweat carving rivers down his face. How long? Her voice shook, seconds, maybe less. The system resisted, layers of firewalls crashing against her like waves. But she pressed on, heart pounding, every keystroke a prayer. At last the screen flickered, connection established. She didn't think, she just uploaded. Names, families, notes, every soul the ledger had preserved. Sent skyward beyond this desert, beyond command silence. The doorframe shattered. Ramos cried out, staggered. She spun. His shoulder was torn open, blood soaking his sleeve. But he stayed on his feet, rifle spitting fire, defiance etched into every line of his face. Finish it, he shouted. She turned back to the console, slamming the final key. Upload complete. The screen flashed green. The truth was out. But victory didn't taste like relief. It tasted like fear. Because when she turned, soldiers flooded the room, rifles leveled, faces twisted in rage. The leader stepped forward, eyes burning. You think anyone will believe you? You think this changes anything? Her chest heaved, sweat dripping, ledger still warm in her grip. She met his gaze, voice low, steady. It already has. The butt of a rifle smashed into her skull. Darkness swallowed her. When she woke, she was bound. Hands tied behind her, boots laced with zip ties. The world swam, head pounding, mouth dry with the taste of copper. Ramos lay across from her, pale, blood still seeping from his wound, barely conscious. The soldiers moved around them, silent, efficient. No words, no laughter, only the cold rhythm of men preparing for transport. She closed her eyes, heartbeat ragged. The ledger was gone. But the upload lived. She didn't fire, not right away. The scope hovered on the figure standing at the far edge of the compound. Dust curled around him. He didn't look armed, not in the way the others had. Just a man, older, shoulders bent, staring across the valley like he was searching for something he'd already lost. Her breath caught. It wasn't hesitation. It was recognition, not of him, but of what he carried, the weight of someone who had already buried too many names. The same hollow she felt every time she closed her eyes at night. Her finger curled near the trigger and stopped. She let the sight fall away. The war wasn't in that man, not anymore. But then movement, not his. Shadows peeled from the door behind him. Younger, faster, rifles angled low but ready. Her decision narrowed into seconds. If she waited too long, they'd disappear into the terrain. If she fired too soon, she'd give away her nest. Her voice, calm but heavy, slipped into the comms. 3 hostiles leaving, northwest exit, marking now. The team below responded instantly, their breaths audible, boots pressing against sand and stone as they shifted position. She tracked them, her scope leading the run, adjusting with small ticks of her wrist. Two fell clean. The third stumbled, firing back wild and panicked. The radio cracked with her team's voices, urgent, alive but cut with adrenaline. For a moment she lost them in the dust. And then silence. Clear, the word returned through static, steady grounding. She closed her eyes, not to rest, but to keep her own center from fraying. Her heart still thundered, but the silence after was heavier than the gunfire had been. The mission was holding. The compound was bleeding out its defenses. The guard towers, what was left of them, burned in low orange. The team pushed deeper, doors breaching, voices echoing against walls that didn't answer back. She stayed on overwatch, but her mind wasn't only in the scope anymore. It drifted backward, to a photo she hadn't looked at in months. A girl, 8 years old, arms around a father who wore his uniform like a second skin. She used to think he was unshakable, untouchable, until the day the folded flag came home instead. Her war had started then, long before her own boots touched foreign soil. Static pulled her back. "We've got one," a voice said, breathless, uncertain. "Not armed, young, maybe 15. Her jaw locked. She knew the script, child soldier or innocent. No easy way to tell in seconds. She shifted her scope again, trying to find the angle. The boy stood in a half-lit corridor, hands raised, trembling, lips moving in words she couldn't hear. Her team hesitated. She could feel it, see it in their posture. Every rule, every briefing, every line of training blurred with memory. She remembered being 15 herself, grieving, angry, searching for someone to blame. What would she have done if someone had put a rifle in her hands then? The pause stretched too long. "Hold," she whispered into the mic. It wasn't an order, it was a plea. The boy collapsed, knees giving way. He wasn't reaching for anything, just sobbing, his hands covering his face. Her team moved, swift and practiced, securing him, pulling him out of the corridor. No shots fired, no blood spilled. For once, restraint had held its ground. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The compound cleared faster after that. Resistance thinned. Doors opened to nothing but shadows and sandbags. By the time the sun angled west, painting the ridges in long, tired light, the mission was done. Extraction came quiet. No fanfare. Just rotors carving the dusk, whipping grit into the air as they boarded. She was the last to leave her post, eyes sweeping the valley one final time. She scanned for movement, for threat, for the guard she'd seen earlier. But he was gone. Only dust remained where he had stood. On the flight back, no one spoke much. Exhaustion was its own language, heavy and understood. She sat with her rifle across her lap, the vibration of the helicopter steady against her spine. Her gaze drifted to the boy, bound but unharmed, head resting against the metal wall as sleep claimed him. She wondered what he dreamed of, if he'd remember their faces, if he'd curse them or thank them years from now. Maybe neither, maybe both. The night swallowed the horizon. City lights flickered faint in the far distance, fragile against the dark. Her reflection in the glass was ghost-like, half there. She touched the pocket at her chest. Not the rifle, not the gear. The pocket where a folded, weathered photo rested, edges worn, colors fading. Her father's smile, caught in a moment that war hadn't yet taken. She thought of what he might say now, not about victories or enemies or missions accomplished, but about mercy, about knowing when not to pull the trigger. The helicopter descended, the base lights rising to meet them. Engines roared, boots hit ground, orders scattered. The mission would be filed, logged, tucked away into classified silence. But inside her, it wouldn't stay silent. She stood on the tarmac, helmet under one arm, the desert air cooling against sweat. Her teammates dispersed, laughter faint, relief sharper than exhaustion. She lingered, eyes lifted to the stars. Distant, cold, unreachable, and yet constant. She thought of the guard who hadn't moved until he did. of the boy whose tears had spared him, of the father who had taught her strength without words. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, a radio crackled, the bass carried on as bassies always do. But she stayed there still, the world momentarily quiet around her. And in that silence, she understood something she hadn't before. War wasn't about the shots you took, it was about the ones you didn't. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of fuel and dust. She closed her eyes just for a moment. And when she opened them, she walked forward, one step at a time, into the darkness that waited.